I'm Alicia.
And I'm Maddie.
And welcome to the Fangirl Diaries, a podcast where we talk about our obsessions,
reminisce about our teen icons,
and explore the books, movies, and shows that made us the incredibly nerdy 30-somethings that we now are. Happy New Year, Maddie!
Hey, it's 2026.
It's 2026, and we are both wearing enormous hoodies. You just confessed that you're in your pajamas.
It's so cold.
It's so cold.
Winter has finally come, indeed.
I was like, just about to. I was like, one of us has to say, winter is here. Winter has come. It's like -1. I bet it's colder in Surrey. What is it?
Oh yeah, I mean there's still snow out on the grass outside. So yeah, it's properly winter now, which is appropriate for our discussion today.
I'm so excited about this. It's almost my birthday, and last year for my birthday, you agreed that we could do Return of the King, which was, like an all-time favorite. And today we're doing our second half of Game of Thrones, which was just too big for us to cover in one episode. But I've been re-watching the entire thing with my husband, who's never seen it before. And we're on season 8. And it just feels like I remember how obsessed I was with it, and I'm just desperate to talk about it. Like, I loved this show, and I love this show so much. So much. Do you remember how into it we were? Can you remember that excitement?
Sure, I absolutely can. And I think especially we're gonna talk about like the second half of Game of Thrones. We're gonna talk about from seasons 5 up to 8. I actually think the peak of my excitement was probably like season 6, around then. Like that was probably when I was like the most into it. I was really into it building up, but I think that was probably when I was like the most obsessed as it was coming out, was around seasons 5 and 6.
These also felt like the seasons where we're at the point that most of the world had caught up. Like, I feel like for the first 3 seasons, there were still some people who hadn't heard of the sort of phenomenon and who hadn't got on the bandwagon. It took me a season or 2 with your excellent direction to catch up. But by the time we were on season 5, 6, it felt like everybody was sitting down every Wednesday or whenever it was to watch these.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about it, but there are some huge episodes in those seasons, particularly in 5 and 6, like absolutely big banger, like, discussions around the world type episodes. As we talked about those in the first few seasons with the Red Wedding and everything, but I think there were some particularly in season 6, that really lived up to that.
Absolutely. Some of the best bits of Game of Thrones actually are in these later seasons, which often get much maligned. And we're going to talk about season 8 and the finale at the end of this episode today. But season 5 and 6, when I was rewatching them, I thought, oh God, yeah, it's this bit. Or the episode title for the next episode would flash up on the screen. And I thought, oh, Luke's going to enjoy this tomorrow. It would say something like, episode 9, Battle of the Bastards. And I thought, yes. I knew what was coming. And when it was on weekly, it was at that stage where if whoever I was watching it with, if we had plans with another group of friends, it just immediately transpired that group of friends also wanted to watch. So everybody would sit down and be watching this together. We watched some of it together. We watched the finale together, which we must have had.
We did. Yeah, I mean, you are going to remember these later seasons way better than I do. I think I know 5 and 6 very well. I rewatched them, multiple times in preparation as every season came out, but I did not do that by the time we got to season 7. And so season 7 and 8 for me are pretty fuzzy, apart from just like general feelings of negativeness, which we will get into. But you are going to have to guide the conversation about the specifics of what happens in the last 2 seasons, because my memory is mostly filled with rage.
Are you saying I'm the three-eyed raven of this podcast episode?
Yes.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, let's start with where everything leaves off. And I think it's appropriate that we split the discussion of Game of Thrones into seasons 1 through 4. It goes without saying, lovely listeners, that if you haven't listened to that one yet, go back and listen to our first Game of Thrones episode. We talk about how we got into it, what those early seasons establish, some of the main characters. But at the close of season 4, that feels like a very big geographical shakeup. A lot of our characters sort of set off on the next stage of their adventure, and quite a lot of people move around the map and get themselves in position for the later seasons. So at the end of season 4, as a reminder, Tyrion kills Tywin with a crossbow on the loo. Epic. That was one of my favorite moments of the earlier season. But that sets in motion his relocation to Essos. He goes over to Meereen with Varys, and that basically moves him into Camp Daenerys. So that's a huge shift. Arya also leaves Westeros and sets off for Braavos with her special coin and her Valar Morghulis password, and heads off to become what we later understand is a faceless man. And we'll go through that subplot. There is also real ramping up of what is going on at the Wall with the dead. And Bran finally, after 4 flippin' seasons of just country trekking, manages to find the three-eyed raven, who it turns out is a man in a tree.
Yeah.
And that, again, shifts us into the second part of Game of Thrones. Okay, Maddie, which of these little pockets of characters do we want to start thinking about and think about their journey of the second half of Game of Thrones?
Ooh, maybe we start with, well, I think my favorite storyline in the second half actually is probably what's going on in King's Landing. I love all the stuff with Cersei and the Sparrows and Marjorie, and that whole storyline is like one of my favorites of like the whole series. So we could start there.
Oh, let's start there. That is something actually that I think is a little bit of a divider for people, as in I feel like it's a bit of a Marmite storyline. Some people found it a little bit slow. Some people thought that characters like Marjorie were put on the bench a bit in those. She spends a lot of a season locked in a cell. And for people who can't remember, this is where the High Sparrow it's really the show having another look. This is where I think it's really clever, and I bet this is your interest too. It's the show having another look at sort of religious extremism.
Religious extremism and how that intersects with politics, and how you can use religion in politics, and also how religion can influence and take over a political system. And that's I think I've discussed this last time, like that's the stuff that I love about Game of Thrones, is the tense discussions between political parties, and like, you know, the slow kind of conniving moves and the things that happen. And it's not to say that this storyline doesn't have drama, because it really does, but it also has a lot of like, who's going to make the next chess move in it, which is what I really like.
It really does, and it is the best example in the whole show of Cersei really being what I would call unplanned by her own plan. Like, she tries to use the Sparrow and his followers, who are effectively devotees of the Seven. That's the religion that they follow. And she thinks that she can harness them in a way that will consolidate Tommen's power, and that she could possibly use them against Highgarden, who she still sees as a bit of a threat. But in giving them that power, they shockingly turn against her, famously imprison her. And it turns out that Tommen, after the death of Joffrey, is just a bit weak and can't actually do anything to rescue his wife, his mother, his wife's brother. They've imprisoned most of the royal family.
Yeah. And I mean it brings some of those like classic shocking moments of Game of Thrones. Like it's got the shame bell lady, which went down in like meme history, but also was a really like horrifying episode with her walking through the streets like completely naked and humiliated. As well as yeah, one of the standout episodes of the whole second half of Game of Thrones for me is the episode where the sept is blown up, and I think that episode is like almost like beautifully made. It's
It
like the
is.
music is beyond anything we've ever heard before. It's just so like emotional and it's spooky and it something's wrong and it builds this tension, and that whole episode is just so shocking in a way that like yeah I really love that episode, and I think that that whole storyline builds to that at the end of season 6, I think it is, which is awesome.
It was a brilliant end to that storyline. And that storyline, in contrast with, I think, some of the criticisms we're going to have of season 7 and 8, is really given time. It's
Yeah.
quite slow. It takes 2 seasons, and there are a lot of quiet, contemplative, and manipulative conversations between the Sparrow, Cersei, Lady Olenna. You really get these vicious and viciously scripted conversations that by the time we hit season 7, we just don't have time for anymore.
Yeah, no. And it's dark. Like,
Very dark.
Tommen kills himself and it's like shocking in a way, but like not in a way that sometimes Game of Thrones goes to the shock factor just because, just like let's make this thing really gross and evil and horrible. Whereas that felt more real and like devastating, that this young boy couldn't cope with what happened and he was thrown into a situation he didn't want to be in. And that is one of the core themes of Game of Thrones, right? Is that like these people that are put in these positions, if you're not one of the actors pulling the strings, you just get swept along by the game and you won't survive. And
Yeah.
that's what happens to Tommen.
On your point about the episode, that's it's very artfully done, that one where the Sept of Baelor is exploded by wildfire. You're right. There's an element of the kind of orchestral scoring to it that's very powerful. It's just a very, very artful episode. To segue into and cover off another character who I'd hope to talk about very quickly, one of the other extremely artful episodes from the second half of Game of Thrones, thank God, is given to the Bran storyline, which otherwise just is painful viewing.
Yes.
And it's the episode called The Door.
Yes.
So that was probably one of my favorite Game of Thrones moments. I got chills, where Bran has been, oh God, on just, this extended trek north of the Wall with Lady Mira and his sort of squad, if you will.
Yeah, he has his little crew.
Yeah. When Luke and I are watching Game of Thrones, we talk about it this way in terms of who's currently in whose squad. So in the second half of Game of Thrones, Daenerys' squad is looking great. She's got Varys, she's got Tyrion. At times she has Ser Jorah, she's got Grey Worm. Her squad is sort of awesome. Cersei's squad is really down on their luck.
Yeah, it's kind of lost everywhere.
And Bran has this kind of ragtag squad traipsing through the north. It's him, Hodor, Mira, and it was Jojen Reed, but he gets killed.
Yeah.
And once he has become the three-eyed raven, who we understand is like the living embodiment of the world's memory, he's almost like a human Pensieve. Like if we borrow something from Harry Potter, he's just like an endless encyclopedia of memory, isn't he? That you can revisit. And that device, I thought, oh, okay, well, that's clever, but let's see something really cool with it. And that really delivers when the dead invade the kind of safe place of the three-eyed raven, and Bran has to flee. And in doing so, Hodor, who we've previously only we've sort of understood just to be somebody who can only say one word. He's half giant, I think, Hodor. And he's,
or at least
we
rumored
can't
to be.
understand.
I think he's rumored to be. Yeah.
Yeah, but as a viewer, is it fair to say we've never really thought twice about his or his importance, or he's very much been an accessory to Bran's squad. But in this episode, The Door, we use Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven's memories to almost a little bit like one of those cyclical time jumps in Harry Potter, in Prisoner of Azkaban, where the idea is that something that happens in a time jump affects the present. And we find out that Hodor is a version of the experience he had yelling, hold the door, hold the door against the dead people. And I remember thinking, okay, now we're dealing with a show that's extremely clever. That was a very, very, very pleasing bit.
Yeah, and I think that's what people wanted from the end of the show. They wanted to find the connections and to have the things that were set up explained to them. And this was one they didn't even know they were going to get explained to them. But when it happened, it was so satisfying that you had this like explanation for why this character was the way they were. And it was, as you say, very like cleverly done and explained. And it was to do with the magic, but in like an interesting way. It wasn't just like gimmicky. It felt like it was a part of the mythos of this world, and it's also like, it's such a terrible thing that happens to him. You feel really devastated that this is what has happened to him.
The Bran.
To Hodor, you
Hodor.
You feel like this person that could have been a real, lived a more normal life, and it's this devastating thing. And I think that's what people wanted and what people were expecting from the conclusion of this show overall. More of that link back to earlier seasons and connections and make it make sense. And that's what we ended up lacking. We ended up lacking in, or if we did get explanations, they were rushed and they didn't make much sense and they didn't feel intelligent in the way that this one really did, right?
This one really did.
We were really looking for that and wanting that, because the whole show is full of foreshadowing and prophecy and hints, and you wanted those resolutions, and it was just so difficult to do that in those last two rushed seasons, which is, but this was a really good example of what we had hoped for, I think.
Does Bran's storyline interest you? And we're parking season 8, so we'll talk about obviously what happens to Bran in the end in a bit. But does anything else interest you about Bran's storyline apart from Hodor's hold the door moment? Feel free to say no.
I think at the time I was more hopeful than other people about Bran's story. I think a lot of people got bored of Bran very quickly, right? A lot of people were like, oh, it's another Bran scene. We're just watching him wander around. And I get that. But at the time, I was really hopeful that he was a key to something really important, and that he had this, he was the one that could see the truth and could read the prophecies, and that I was really hoping the Three-Eyed Raven was going to mean something important. And therefore I didn't at the time mind the storyline, because I was expecting it to go somewhere. And so you can say park season 8 all you like, but the point is that storyline is bad because it never came to anything. If it had come to something, and if it had made like something satisfying at the end, the storyline would have been interesting to me, because I don't mind slow, I don't mind prophecy, and I don't mind looking into the past and working out all the secrets. All of that stuff is really cool if it has a payoff. The fact that it didn't have a payoff made it bad.
Okay, is it that then? And I suppose we don't even have to wait until season 8 to talk about this, because it's revealed in season 7. Do we feel that the payoff, the big reveal, which is, spoiler alert, Bran revealing that Jon Snow is Aegon Targaryen and the heir to the Seven Kingdoms, Do we
Yes.
not like that because it feels too rushed, because it feels too obvious? It was almost guessable. Do we feel like the flashbacks were too rushed? Because that is Bran's purpose up until season 8.
Yes. I think it's a mixture of things. I think everyone knew that, right? Everyone who knew a little bit about Game of Thrones knew that Jon Snow was Lyanna Stark's like child and with the Targaryens. Like it was known,
Didn't
right?
had
Like
no idea.
it was so known. And therefore, that being the thing that Bran revealed is not that big a deal because if you know it already, you're like, oh, that was the thing that Bran's going to reveal. Cool.
It must be obvious because, as I said, Luke is on his first watch, and I think it was by about season 3. Luke went, "Oh, John's a Targaryen."
Right.
I was like, "Oh crap, he's guessed it." I was like, "Oh well, but I don't know. What if he's like from Dawn?"
Yeah.
But I mean, by the time it was season 7, I must have rewatched the earlier seasons multiple times in order to kind of catch back up again. And I was there scratching my head, like, okay, wait, hang on. So he is the son. It is quite patchily put together. He is the son of Rhaegar, who is Daenerys's brother. Awkward.
Yeah.
But there is a very hasty bit of dialogue in which it's explained that Samwell Tarly has found a piece of paper in the Citadel explaining very quickly that there was a marriage annulment from Rhaegar's previous marriage, therefore legitimizing Jon, who is
Yeah, which again is showing one of the things that like makes this whole end of this series frustrating is because I almost like the first the first set of seasons were all deeply following the books, right? So by the time we get to the end, the writers have to come up with some of this stuff. Like they've been told that, or they know, and it's part of the storyline that Jon is a Targaryen and Lyanna Stark's child, and they then have to come up with ways to make that make sense. And they do it in a way that is not how George R. R. Martin would do it. First of all, George R. R. Martin still hasn't written those books, and he probably never will. But if he had, that wouldn't have been what happened, right? So in my mind, Sam finding that bit of paper and all that, it's just not true. It's like that isn't what happened because it's just wrong. So I mean, it's almost so fundamentally stupid, all of this stuff, that I just almost don't accept it as what fan people would call canon. Like, I just don't think it's what happens in the story. The story hasn't been written yet. It's all just nonsense. And so that makes it really hard because I can talk about it, but I'd be like, yeah, but Sam didn't find that piece of paper. There'll be a much better explanation. It's just that we don't know what that explanation is yet.
So what you're saying is actually you quite like the long-term plotting and long-term build of the fact that Jon is actually the heir to the Seven Kingdoms, but you hate the delivery. You hate the reveal.
Yes.
Yeah. I do. I think I feel similarly, actually. I really like the payoff of it being that Jon is the rightful heir. I know it's obvious. Like Luke was annoyed by it because Jon is this Christ-like figure who he never really puts a foot wrong. He's the out and out hero. And in many ways, there are people with more shades of grey that it might have been more interesting to see revealed to be the big kind of the prince that was promised, to use the language of the show.
Yeah.
But something about it is still satisfying that it's Jon. But the way it's delivered and the fact that seems to be Bran's only plot purpose.
Yes. He needed more because we all knew that, like, as you say, not everyone knew, but a lot of people had worked that out. So therefore, Bran's storyline becomes like very pointless. It needed more power.
He did need
something
more.
else.
He almost feels like a parallel to him, who I feel has a better end to their otherwise kind of micro plot, is Luke and I have just finished watching the Battle of Winterfell. And we have spent seasons and seasons watching Melisandre and being frustrated by her or liking her, or she's actually much more dynamic on screen than poor old Bran at all. But in the Battle of Winterfell, Bran's singular purpose is to sit there as bait for the Night King. He really has no point. He has no additional powers apart from this being the living memory. When Melisandre turns up, she sets the Dothraki swords on fire. She lights the trenches. The episode ends with the shot of her walking out into the snow, taking off her cloak. I mean, also, like, Melisandre just can't go out without getting naked again.
I know.
Her last shot, I believe, of her like falling naked into the snow. But she felt like she added more value to that than Bran did. And also Bran is just so boring to watch. He just the character itself is so boring. To have to be someone who speaks in a monotone voice and says, it's time we told Jon the truth. Oh, that person is just not interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, since we're on Jon, shall we talk about Jon and Daenerys then?
Yes, or we might have to build their separate plot lines separately until
bring
they
it
meet.
together. Bring it together. Yeah. Okay.
Who should we do first, Jon or Daenerys?
Let's talk about Jon.
Jon is eminently watchable. He's just always watchable.
Yeah.
Seasons 5 and 6, we are with him at the Wall. This is very much.
He's just come back to life at the beginning of season 5. Is that right?
No, he dies at the end of. No, he doesn't.
It's earlier.
They haven't killed him yet at that point.
Okay. So it's at the end of 5 into 6.
That's right.
Yeah.
In 5 is a great one for Jon. There's the very pleasing moment for the viewer where Jon is elected the commander of the Night's Watch. He goes up against Sir Alistair Thorne, and it's finally, there's that great bit where Maester Aemon casts the deciding vote, and Jon is elected the commander of the Night's Watch.
Yeah.
But his act as commander is to go, he says he's going to go and rescue the wildlings from Hardhome and bring them south of the Wall. Bad move. But a lot of his fellow Night's Watch turn against him and think he has betrayed them by saving.
Well, he kind of has. He kind of has from their perspective. And I think that's this is another classic, great Game of Thrones lesson, right? Is that, as soon as something you think is positive happens, if you are not super careful about understanding the motivations of everyone else around you, you can really mess up. And that's what Jon does. Is you think that he's had a nice moment and it lasts no time. That's classic Game of Thrones.
It is. And the real bellwether for this, and this is really clever television, or satisfying television at least, is, do you remember the little boy who joins the Night's Watch called Ollie?
Yeah, Ollie, yeah, of course.
And Jon makes him his steward, a little bit like a continuation of what Commander Mormont did for him. But Ollie's family had been slaughtered by Ygritte and the Fens on their way to attack Castle Black in earlier seasons. And Jon just fails to understand the depth of hatred that the Night's Watch have for the wildlings.
Yeah, which he should understand. He really should. I mean, it's very similar to Rob not understanding what he's done by marrying Talisa. It's if you do not understand the consequences of your actions on the people around you, you are going to be struck down. You cannot be so naive in this world, I think. And that's what Jon does. He's naive and thinks, well, I like the wildlings, so everyone else must get on board with my plan. It's no, these people have been fighting for hundreds, if not thousands of years as enemies. Why do you think you can change that in the course of a year?
It's actually another clever political parallel. He's given a democratic mandate to lead. Yeah. And then it's he suddenly comes up with some rogue policy that wasn't on his campaign trail.
Yeah.
No one voted for him to save the wildlings. He's elected for a day. And then he decides that him and Tormund are going to head out. By the way, Tormund, awesome character.
Hilarious, yeah.
Love him. One of the all-time faves. Battle of Hardhome's awesome though. That's great television.
Yeah.
That's a great great episode of battling in the snow. That's really where we're reminded again of the military capability of the dead.
Yes.
It's terrifying that.
Yeah,
Terrifying.
they are yes, that's one of those moments where you go, oh yes, these are the real enemy, and everyone should be remembering that, and yet nobody is paying attention.
No. And it's a second reminder of we need that key factual information about the logistics behind killing either White Walkers or the dead, which is that you've got the option of fire on the dead, but White Walkers, it's got to be dragon glass or Valyrian steel.
Glass. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And we need that information to get us into the next seasons. But Jon then comes back and is brutally killed by his own men, including by little boy Ollie. Did you see that coming? Do you remember that? The death of Jon?
I don't remember my initial reaction specifically, no. I mean, I think this was probably the seasons where I was watching it in like a big group setting with all of my nerdy friends. So I think it would have been shock and group shock and awe and anger. But yeah, I don't remember it specifically.
I was astonished. I didn't see that coming at all. I could see the seeds of anger and discontent that they were very cleverly laying among the Night's Watch. But the way they film that scene is someone rushes in and says to him, like, oh, Lord Commander, you're needed at the gate or something. And he goes out to follow. And the viewer as well doesn't suspect there's anything wrong. And he turns the corner and sees that sign they've painted saying traitor. Yeah. And then they stab him. I remember being shocked.
Yeah, it's another one of those. Dead? It's another one of. I think I did think he was dead. I think
so did I.
I think I remember thinking that Game of Thrones wouldn't bring people back to life. I don't know. It didn't feel like it was within the realms of what was normal. I suppose we always had the who were those? The Band of Brothers people who like escaped death. So maybe there was some hints there that it was possible. But yeah, my instinct was that like, no, when we see people die, we see them die. That's what Game of Thrones has taught us so far. So no, I wasn't expecting him to come back to life, but I do think that this was probably around the era where I read too much stuff about Game of Thrones on Reddit as it was coming out.
That's so you, Maddie. That's so you.
I think it ruined it for me. I think the last few seasons were partly ruined by me reading too much of other people's opinions, other people's guesses about what was going to happen in between seasons or between episodes. And I think this was probably the first point where people did guess that Jon was coming back. In fact, I think it might be in the books already hinted or something that he was coming back. I don't think it's happened in the books at this point, but it was hinted, I think, that he was likely to come back. So I think I was starting to get stuff kind of ruined for myself by reading too much online, and that really didn't help the enjoyment, I don't think. And this was probably one of those things where there were a lot of people saying he was coming back, and even if I didn't personally think it was kind of ruined a bit when it happened because people online had already said it.
My memory of that time is that this was the big speculation in the culture. Is Jon dead or not? Yeah. Is he coming back? I think people were even taking sort of bets. But during the interim period between seasons, I was working at an actors agency in London while I was doing my master's degree. And the agency represented Kit Harington among a whole bunch of people. And he came in, and I remember there had to be a sort of team meeting at the start of the day saying there was an absolute lockdown on no one was to speak to him, not a single person. He had to have, he came in to do, I think he was shooting he was doing he was taping or auditioning for something else. and he had to do his taping alone in a room where he was sitting in this kind of glass room all day. I thought he looked really miserable. And sort of put his coffee outside the door, and then he had to pick it up because I think it was to do with, it must have come from HBO and the showrunners, that he was on absolute lockdown. He was not allowed to have, because people would have gone up to him and been like, "Are you dead?"
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
But he was treated so seriously. But I would love to know, I don't know whether he's spoken about it in interviews, but I wonder what that experience of that interim period was like for Kit Harington, because he obviously knew that Jon Snow was coming back. But he must have had this really lonely, almost must have been like a micro COVID year for him. Like he had to self-isolate.
Yeah.
He was on personal lockdown for that period. Okay, and then when he does come back, season 6 is a real banger for Jon. This is really Jon emerging with, he's more cynical now. He's been killed. He gives up commander of the Night's Watch. He hands it over to Gren. He gives him his cloak and says, "Now my watch is ended," and stalks off in a kind of sexy, moody way. Until he realizes that Sansa is alive and has escaped. And we'll come back to Sansa in a minute. But she convinces him to fight Ramsay to reclaim Winterfell.
Yeah.
Do you remember where you watched that big show?
Oh my God, yeah. I can. I was definitely one of the big screen episodes on a big show of TV.
But Battle of the Bastards is Ramsay versus Jon, and it is where the wildlings and Jon and what is left of, well, he's got like Sir Davos with him, get crushed.
Oh yeah, I remember the horses being the main thing in that, but also it was the tension between Jon and Ramsay, and the knowledge that like that Ramsay had his siblings, and it was like the cruelty of Ramsay, which I think we talked about in the last episode, is brought to a head in this battle. Well, actually, no, Ramsay's cruel lots of times in the show, but this is one of the many times where his like cruelty is on display. And you have this like pure goodness of Jon against the evilness and the cruelty of Ramsay, who has no care for like battle tactics or whatever. He's just going to do whatever's the most evil thing that he can do. So yeah,
I think it's the most satisfying human conflict of the season, this battle, because when we have the battle of the living versus the dead, the Night King isn't as fully rendered a character. Like, I don't hate the Night King as much as I hate Ramsay.
No, of course, yeah.
And so you're right, it's the polarity of Jon Snow, our big hero, the good guy, versus Game of Thrones is most hated. Like, I hate Ramsay more than Joffrey.
Yeah.
Ramsay is so evil and so twisted and so maniacal that to have him go up against Jon Snow is brilliant. And that whole battle is so brilliantly paced with their little trade-off of words at the start. Jon Snow offers to fight Ramsay 1-1, and Ramsay says no, because he knows he doesn't get to play his games that way. And he has that lovely exchange with Sansa. Ramsay sort of says, "I'm looking forward to having you back, my wife." And she says, "You'll die tomorrow, Lord Bolton." But we don't know how, because Jon is vastly outnumbered. It's one of those, another, we need a Deus Ex Machina. It takes Littlefinger to turn up.
Which is what happens, yeah.
It does.
We get it. We need it.
It's gruesome, though.
We do get the satisfying end to Ramsay, though, with his eaten by his own hounds, which is another classic Game of Thrones moment.
It was brilliant. He had to have an awful death.
Yeah.
And it had to be Sansa who gave it to him.
Yeah.
Although when we were watching recently, Luke was convinced that it had to be at the hands of Theon, that Theon deserved to kill Ramsay. Which I think has legs.
They were equally, yes, both of them were tormented by Ramsay in different ways.
Yeah. That later part of, well, okay, we've talked about Ramsay, but he intersects mainly with, or serves in some ways, Sansa's storyline. What do we think about later Sansa? Like at the end of season 4, she's fled the capital because Joffrey has been killed, and she throws in her lot with Littlefinger.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember from last time we spoke, I've always quite liked Sansa, and I never liked the criticism of her as this like weaker, kind of girlier girl, because that was all she was ever taught to be. And she's had to throw herself into these awful situations and did so. Um, she survived a lot and has survived a lot. And it is only in this like second half of the series where she is able to start making her own moves, taking some power back, finding the right people to, or the wrong people to to go in with. But at least she's taking a bit more control in the second half. And obviously that leads us to her really having lots and lots of power in the north by the end of the series, which I think people hopefully did come to like Sansa more in the second half of the series.
I love Sansa by the end of the second half of the series. I didn't hate her in the early scenes, but she was a tough watch. Like it was a shame that Sophie Turner had to play her that way for so long. Sophie Turner really thrives on later Sansa's scripts.
Mm.
She's got a brilliant, brutal coldness to her. Um, and I love when she starts to take power in the north, when she's reclaimed Winterfell, how she holds her own through some of those later scenes with Ramsay. Her storyline with Ramsay actually was a very difficult watch for, I hate those kind of torture plots. I hated watching Ramsay with Theon. I hated the kind of sexual torture of Sansa. It was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this was some of the scenes that went a bit far, I thought. But I liked the resolution of her becoming the Lady of Winterfell, and Sophie Turner does that so well. Finally
Mm.
ending in her rejecting Littlefinger and sentencing him to death, which I thought was very satisfying. But
Yeah, for sure.
Sansa gets a proper character arc in the sense of if you look at the characters who exist right from episode 1, season 1 to the end, Sansa is a completely different person.
Yeah.
Arya Arya is sort of the same person, but given the means to be who she wanted to be. But
Yes.
Jon Snow is the same
The
person.
same person,
The
yeah.
same person. Whereas Sansa sits in the category along with people like Daenerys, or I'm even going to put Jamie in this category, where you think, okay, you are different now. You've
Yeah.
gone on a very enjoyable journey.
Yeah. You know who I was just thinking about as we were talking about the storylines in the North and that comes in this second half of the series is the little Lyanna Mormont, who's played by Bella Ramsey, the
I love
like the
her.
bear lady. And she came in and she just like she's a child literally in the first series where she comes up. And everyone immediately loved her. Like in a way that like she was so different from like original Sansa. She was like this like fierce lady, even though she was only like 9 years old or whatever. And that was actually a case of when Game of Thrones really like launched a career. Like Bella Ramsey is like a superstar now. She's like incredible. So yeah, I just that just reminded me of that whole Mormont storyline and that character. So much fun.
Luke and I have literally watched her heroic death being crushed by the giant at the Battle of
Oh,
Winterfell. Oh,
oh.
oh, one of the saddest deaths in season 8. I love, love, love Lyanna Mormont. And then Arya and the Game of Faces in Bravos.
Mm,
2 seasons. Love it or hate
mm.
it?
This is the same as Bran for me in that I, at the time, well, no, actually, I probably disliked this even more at the time. I was getting more and more frustrated with it because it felt like she just like was in this other land for seasons and seasons with not much happening. And yet, again, if it had come to something, if it had meant something, if there had been like a conclusion to that storyline that felt satisfying, I think it could have been saved. But every time I thought something was going to happen that was like going to make it worth it. It didn't. And she does use the like face changing thing to kill Walder Frey, but like Walder Frey by the end is like a minor character that like killed her brother many, many seasons ago. We don't
Yeah.
care. And she ends up like she does have her big moment at the end. She's the one that kills the the White
The
Walker
Night King.
King, the Night King. But it's not because she's a faceless person or because of any like skill that she's learned in the many years wandering about Bravos. She just happens to be in the right place at the right time and does it, which is just so unsatisfying. So I think it's another one of these things where like I can't separate the story from its ending because the ending is so like doesn't give us any reason for why this storyline existed.
This storyline went on too long for me. I actually
Mm.
did like the concept, but I felt like it was flabby in parts. There were episodes in seasons 5 and 6 with Arya in Bravos where she's pretending to be an oyster seller, or
It's the waif that she's like running away
yeah,
from and whatever. Yeah.
yeah, her fellow ninja who's just a bit
Yeah.
nasty. And Jaqen Hagar slows down as a character. And I agree with you. I thought this really needs to go somewhere awesome for me to have
Yeah.
wasted some time on this. And it isn't enough that she's just got some more gymnastic ninja skills, because that could have been done another way. Which leads us to the much, much better theory that you and I had come up with for the end of Game of Thrones, which to this day I maintain would have been better.
Yeah.
Do you remember that we were convinced that an absolutely brilliant twist, we had got to this point kind of partway through season 8 where we were speculating about who would win the Game of Thrones,
Yes.
would be, imagine if we were sort of imagining if Arya won in the end, but that the joke was on the audience, because it turned out that our theory was Arya, the real Arya, had died in the darkness in the fight against the waif, as in
Yeah.
she knocks the candle out and we never see what happens there.
Because she's like bleeding out. She's literally dying. And yet
Yep.
somehow we're meant to believe she survives this. Anyway.
And it would have justified the notion of being no one, of being a faceless man, would have meant that the waif could have posed as Arya for the whole rest of
In
Game of
Westeros. Yeah.
in Westeros.
Where she has a
And
name and a title and importance. Yeah.
there are loads of little giveaways, even as I've even been rewatching it, that would have suggested mine and your theory had legs. Like um Maisie Williams, is that her name?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maisie Williams in the later seasons, when she comes back to Westeros, has managed to pick up some brilliant little ticks, like little verbal and facial and mannerism ticks that the waif had throughout, that I thought were these like brilliant clues. Um, she's much colder than she was. She's much more ruthless than she was. We noticed something to do with the inaccuracy of the scar on her body or something. Do you remember? Me and you were convinced that the big
Yeah.
reveal would be that Arya isn't Arya anymore. Even though she kills the Night King, it's going to be that it's the waif. And that would have been so good.
And that would have been so cool. And I think this was, again, one of the problems with the speculation and everything that was going on around these seasons, is that people were coming up with better plots than the plot that we ended up with. And that is like a major issue, right? If the people who are like speculating and like writing theories online are coming up with more satisfying conclusions that make more sense, that feel more on theme and on like brand for the show. If that's what's happening, you've got a real problem, because everything then just feels worse. People are guessing things and then going, oh, that's what the ending is. Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, it left people saying we should have written in and told them our idea because it was much better.
Yeah.
Before we move to the catastrophe that is the end, let's bring our last major thread together, which is, as boring as I find some of Arya in Bravos in seasons 5 and 6. I have to say, even rewatching it again, I'm convinced I find Daenerys in Meereen quite slow.
Yeah, yeah.
To the extent,
Daenerys'
Maddie, where I
storyline
would
is
bet,
always slow, right? Daenerys is always slow. She's kind of wandering about.
yeah, well, on the wandering about, she decides to sort of park herself at Meereen for
Yes.
about 2 seasons. She has defeated the slavers, and this is a very slow subplot about a micro uprising. The sons of the Harpy who prefer the old world of slavery rise up against her. She loses Sabarist and Selny. She kicks out Ser Jorah, who it's revealed had initially tried to
Yeah.
assassinate her.
Yeah, you're
But the
right.
plan
None
is,
of that is interesting.
it's not. It takes Tyrion and Varys to show up, and I think, oh, thank fuck.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Because those two make any storyline energetic and
Yeah, because
interesting.
they're great actors and great characters. Yeah.
Yeah, it suddenly means you get things like there are some great bits where Tyrion plays a drinking game with Grey Worm and Missandei, and you end up thinking, oh, these characters are actually funny. I hadn't realized they were
Mm.
funny before. There's a whole boring subplot where Daenerys is briefly re-kidnapped by the Dothraki. But really, I'm sort of aching for her to get to Westeros by the
Yeah.
time we are concluding that Meereen section. I'm like, just get on your boat.
Looking back, she should have just gone earlier. Like, we ended up with, we're going to talk about it probably now, so much rushing in the last 2 seasons to get her places, to get her where she needs to be so that the big battles can all happen. Why couldn't, like, her storyline have moved faster earlier, and then we wouldn't have had to rush so much at the end?
I completely agree. And I would like to swap a season for a season, as in, I want something condensed and something enhanced. So I
Mm.
want to cross out a season for Daenerys in Meereen. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
However, in season 7, she has landed on Dragonstone, and this is her moment where she's on the verge of conquering Westeros. But there is this tension starting to play out with Jon Snow arrives
Yeah.
to forge an alliance with her. Now, if you are going to sell me Jon Snow and Daenerys as a romantic storyline, sell it to me. I want
Yeah.
2 seasons of it.
Yes, could
I
have
want
been
a
great.
proper build-up.
They are both
Could have been great.
attractive people. It could have been awesome. But yeah, we needed like multiple years of build up and like tension and reason
Yeah.
for them to be attracted to each other and whatever. But yeah, no.
We go from, if you follow the actual timeline of it, we go from a first conversation between them to them being supposedly in love within a season. And these are our two biggest characters who I do believe would be attracted to each other. But I wanted that to play out longer and through proper conversations. And they really have to negotiate their power with one another in a way that could have been really interesting. And where, when we eventually find out that they are related and can't
Yeah.
be together, I would have wanted to find that really desperately sad
Yeah, we
as
should
a
have
viewer.
cared. Yeah.
Yeah, we should have cared. Whereas it is quite literally done in a quick edit that we edit from Bran saying to Sam, Jon is the heir to the Seven Kingdoms. He's Aegon Targaryen. Literally to him and Daenerys naked. And you're like,
Yeah.
wait, sorry. My brain can't compute this. You're telling me he's the heir in the same time as showing me him and Daenerys getting together. But the tragedy is already planted because they can't be together. It just felt it was a 10 seconds of Game of Thrones that I thought needed to be 10 episodes.
Yeah. And it's jarring because the whole first 6 seasons have been slow. That's been the pace. You've expected that like an episode can focus on like a day or a few days of time over a whole episode, or that like traveling across Westeros, just like between two cities that are not even that far apart from each other can take multiple episodes. And fine, it's okay to have a show where, one episode spans multiple weeks or months and you move through what's going on in that time period, but not when you've already had a precedent for things taking their time, for characters building relationships like at almost real pace, and for physical travel. This was just the jarring change between 6 and 7. Physical travel should be difficult and slow. Like that's the medieval world we were in, and suddenly
it's almost absurd.
It's so insane.
In season 7, the mileage covered by Jon Snow, Daenerys, a dragon, they're hopping back and forth from the north to Dragonstone to beyond the wall. But you're asking me also to contemplate that it's taken 8 seasons for some dead guys who seem to run quite fast to move from literally, the north of Scotland down to what would be about York.
Yeah. And there's no problem with a show that works at a fast pace, but not when you've already set it up to work at a slow pace. It was baffling.
Yeah. I think what we're saying time and again is that we like some of these end concepts. We just dislike the execution. Like, I do enjoy the poetic tragedy of having followed Daenerys for so long and her feeling like on so many levels she has earned it, only to have the rug pulled out from under her to say there is a secret heir who's actually more eligible than you. Oh, P.S. You thought you were going to be getting together with him.
Yeah.
Double tragedy.
Yeah, and yeah, I think you're right. Like, the concept is not bad. It's just we are not given time to understand the consequences and how the characters would really react. And yeah, it's really hard. It's hard when big things are thrown in your face and you're expected to just accept them and move on to the next bit of the plot without that time.
Season 8, to move there now, you really dislike. I want to give some quick defensive points for, which is that I really feel the first half is not that bad.
I was looking at the IMDb ratings for the series, which is hilarious. Actually, season 7 does just fine, which in my mind is baffling because in my mind, season 7 is basically just as bad as season 8. It just isn't the terrible ending bit, which I know everyone hates. But season 7 to me in my mind is kind of just squished in with season 8 as this is where it all went weird and fast and strange. But actually season 7 gets high 8s and 9 ratings. Season 8 immediately, the first half is down in the 7s. And then the second half is 5s and 4s.
Okay. But that first half, I really think needs some defense because you get these 2 wonderful episodes. These are the David Nutter episodes. He does the talking episodes as a director.
Yeah.
And especially the second episode of season 8, which is the one before the Battle of Winterfell, the night before, is so enjoyable as a viewer because we bring all our characters together. Jaime comes to defend the living. Brienne is there. Pod. Sam is back. Arya is back with Sansa. You sort of feel like the Uber squad is together. And again, it's
I remember finding it annoying. I remember finding it contrived, I think is the word, for that this didn't make any sense, that these people wouldn't all be there and be in the same place. And it didn't. Maybe it was because that's never how the show has been up until this point, and they were trying to build to a single conclusion. But to me, I didn't get that feeling that you had, which is it's satisfying that all these people are coming back together and it's going to come to a conclusion. I just remember being frustrated and annoyed.
That's okay. And then we move after the Battle of Winterfell, which I thought was cool. Impossible to view, very, very annoyingly shot in terms of the lighting levels. But otherwise, pretty awesome. It's just that nothing can beat the Battle of Helm's Deep. That's it.
No,
It's just
no, no. It could never be the Battle of Helm's Deep. Yeah.
and also that the tension was relatively spoiled because we know the dead can't win. Like Luke was saying, they can't win, or there's no more episodes. As in,
Yeah.
where that battle is positioned, the living have to win.
Yes. I guess that's forgivable though, in a way, in that you've got to have an end, right? You've got to come up with something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. But well, I guess it almost would have been more satisfying if the dead had won and then we'd seen what was like the remnants of society trying to continue after that point. Could have been a more interesting conclusion, but I guess that was never really where it was going to go. So like you kind of just gotta come up with something.
I think I just also remember the absolute party around season 8. So season 8, those early 3 episodes were aired when my then boyfriend James and I, and we've talked about this a lot in our Lord of the Rings episodes, we had gone on our 3-week-long trip to New Zealand, and it felt like all of New Zealand was watching Game of Thrones. And the Airbnbs were advertising whether or not they had whatever was the version of HBO, whatever was the channel you had to have to watch this.
Yeah.
And, they were saying, like, don't worry, you don't have to cancel your night stay with us because we will be showing Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And so James and I watched some of this season with some extremely lovely people who we sat down with and at points, cried with, who we never met ever again. Just like in their living room. And on the 6-hour drives in between, you never just watched the episode. We then listened to Thronecast. We were then listening to 3 other podcasts dissecting the episode. We listened to the next episode build up. It was madness.
I remember now, and I should have pulled this out of my depths of my Google Drive. I ran a sweepstakes at my work for what the ending was going to be. And it wasn't just like what the ending was going to be in plot. It was like how each character was going to, whether they were going to survive or die or become a White Walker. I think that was 3, or become like an undead person. That was like the 3 options you had to give for every person. And then you could get additional points for who was going to like win the Game of Thrones, like who was going to be on the throne, and maybe like a separate one for King of the North or whatever. I can't remember. But if I can find that, I'm posting it on our Instagram because it was amazing. I had this whole spreadsheet of like sweepstakes data of our whole company just like voting on every single character, what was going to be their outcome.
See, these were good times. These were simpler times. And we watched the final episode together. You had James and I round to your flat. We watched it with you and Ben. And bless you, Maddie, you had made themed snacks. Do you remember this? And
yes, I do.
Food. And you had like labeled the ale. Like you you had like a little map of Westeros and like what snack came from where. You rule. It was so good. Okay, so the end. What? Okay, so we have to talk about Daenerys going mad, Jon being the one to kill her, and then the fact that dun dun dun, Bran is crowned the king of this. I almost can't say it.
Let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it.
I don't think we can talk about it.
I actually didn't hate Daenerys going mad, which I know a lot of people do. I think it's another case of like the idea is good, but the execution is bad. Like the idea of her, like we have seen Daenerys be ruthless and cruel in the past. She's killed like huge swathes of people. She's burnt people to death. She's hung them up on her walls. Like she is not this like pure and innocent character that some people like to think she was. And so actually her going mad and like having everything taken, or she thinks everything has been taken away from her and she's not going to like fulfill her like purpose that was like the whole reason for her existence, actually it's not a bad idea. It just, again, it was so rushed. It all happened so quickly that it feels like hey, Daenerys was this like nice girl who likes Jon and is making out with him in the tower, and now she's killing everyone.
She's crazy.
Yeah, she's crazy. And it's like, if that had been executed right, it could have been good, but it wasn't.
And the emotional plotting of Jon and Daenerys was too rushed. That was the problem, that I want to move what happens in seasons 7 and 8 earlier into season 6 or even 5, where I want Daenerys and Jon to have had a proper love story that then makes it really tragic when the reveal about his parentage means they just can't be together. We just can't sign off on it as viewers.
Not that the Targaryens normally have a problem with incest, but whatever.
No, but the viewer can't sanction it, I think is the problem with the show. And Jon, as the viewer's mouthpiece, isn't okay with it. It puts him off. He's like, oh, I can't. You're my aunt.
Yeah.
And so, and that her descent into madness needed to be slower. You're right. It was rushed. And the idea as well. I even liked that Jon was the one to kill her, but it all happened within the space of about 20 minutes.
Yeah, which sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Too rushed.
So what are some of the other ending bits then? I guess we've talked a little bit about Sansa and Queen of the North. That's a satisfying ending.
Love it. Love that. No problem with that. That's fine.
Yeah.
You know what I did like, and that actually made me sad, where I thought that hit in the right way. I liked the tragic end of Cersei and Jaime. I wanted better for them. I actually wanted them to get away. I wanted them to make it onto a boat and to go. And despite all of Cersei's evil, I didn't feel she deserved a villain's death. And I thought it was genuinely sad when Tyrion finds his 2 siblings under the rubble. It's really sad.
That is sad. That is sad. But
that got me.
Isn't there like a weird, I remember them being like in the middle of the battle, and there's like, I can't remember exactly how it all happens, but I remember the actual moment of them going being not particularly well executed.
No, they're quite literally buried under rubble.
Yeah.
The building falls down on them. They don't get out in time. There's a satisfying fight between Jaime and Euron. Jaime kills Euron.
Oh yeah, Euron. Yeah, we haven't even really talked about Euron. I don't think any
he's
of
not
that
worth talking about. He's not worth discussion.
No.
He is the third act villain who simply isn't as interesting as Joffrey or Ramsay. He's another hateful guy. He's another psychopath, but we just don't have the bandwidth at this point.
No, he was not a good part of the last couple of seasons. Yeah.
I had thought Cersei was going to be killed by Arya because she was on her list. That didn't happen. I like that the Hound finally got his date with the Mountain, but again, it was a bit rushed. It was a bit rushed, that. And it all just moved towards probably the worst moment in TV history, which is that little round table discussion where people just
they're
go,
all like sitting on the stupid like circle thing with their each got their thrones. Oh, it's so badly written. It's terrible.
I think Tyrion or someone just goes, yeah, I think it should be Bran. And I'm like, no.
Why would it be Bran? Nobody knows who Bran is. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. He has no claim on the throne. He's boring as fuck. Oh, he's not even Bran anymore. He's this like, I thought at the very least that Bran would replace on the small council sort of Grand Maester Pycelle. Like, by all means, have him there.
Whatever, yeah. Or just like go live up in the north like the original Three-Eyed Raven and like make some prophecies. Like nobody cares.
It's like the fact that it's not Jon or Tyrion or like one of these much more eligible people who you think I've spent seasons with you.
Why would we believe that like this all-seeing weird like out of this world creature would have any interest in governing? Like it's a political position where you have to like take decisions, not just like pontificate on like prophecies. It makes no sense. And
it makes no sense.
There's that like line that's been much maligned forever. Who's like, oh, who's had the greatest story of them all? And it's like, not Bran. Like, what do you mean?
No way is it Bran. We're like, are we watching a different show?
It was never Bran.
That I honestly think when it was Bran, I thought, oh, it's fine. Don't worry. It's some joke. Like it's something. And then it's going to be revealed that Bran abdicates within 2 seconds and suddenly it's Tyrion. Or like I just thought, no, it can't go this way. And then we got to the bit where Arya sails off on her boat, Jon heads off into the north, and I thought, wait, it's actually Bran. I would like my refund.
There should have been, it should have been that the throne was broken and, that something else. It needed to be something else.
Anything else, or that it could have become a republic and all the different, like Sansa in the north, the Dornish in the south, like please all just like have a seat around a table. Not, it could have become like the United Nations. Ugh. Oh God. Luke and I are going to watch that within the next, 48 to 72 hours. And
oh my God. Does Luke know what's coming?
No, and he hasn't guessed it. He did guess that I think he thinks Jon is the king, which to be honest, like I get.
Yeah, it would make sense.
I don't have the heart to be like, actually, I'm just messing with you, but it's Bran.
What does the prince that was promised even mean anymore? What does the fact that there was just so many threads of all this stuff that didn't mean anything by the end?
Yeah, it really felt at the end like we went eeny, meeny, miny, mo, Bran will do.
Yeah.
And then decided to actually film that and put it on film.
I mean, there's so many like stories of the actors just like reading this last episode and like their reactions being painfully aware of how bad it was.
Yeah, I know.
But if you know that from an actor's point of view, how did the writers not know it? I think they just gave up.
I think they just gave up. And that is sad for a show that is one of the best television shows of all time.
Yeah.
And where so many better endings were available. I mean, it would have been corny, but make Jon. Just like Tyrion. Like, come on. Make it Arya. I don't care. It could have been Sansa and I would have been happy. Not Bran. Not Bran. Not Bran.
Oh
I tell you why it's not Bran, just to kind of wrap this up, is that there is no payoff with it being Bran. We could have attributed, if it was Sansa, you think, okay, this was a show that was promising us a female queen at the end. And we see, and is it Cersei? Is it going to be Sansa? This is about female empowerment. And is it going to be okay? I can understand why that would be Sansa being the queen. No, okay, we're not going to have that. Is it going to be this sort of miraculous, heroic, Christ-like narrative with Jon, where he is the prince that is promised, and we're going to lean into prophecy? Or is it going to be that the underdog triumphs and that intellect wins in a meritocracy, and therefore it's Tyrion? Oh, no, it's none of those.
It's just some random person that we all voted for some God knows reason. I mean, yeah, it's unforgivable. And, we can put some blame on the fact that the books weren't finished, but like they knew that when they started these series. They knew that like some new books would get written, but not others. And you need to be able to write plot that makes sense, not just adapt existing plot. Like they were clearly very, very good at taking an existing plot and adapting it and writing it for screen, creating the characters, creating those moments and those like shocks and those discussions between characters and whatever, and like adapting. But what they clearly was made very obvious in the last 2 seasons is that they could not come up with original plot.
I agree. And it's sad to leave it on a sad note. I mean, we lived for this at times. This was the defining TV show of our sort of, I would say, of my 20s, because we've talked extensively about earlier ones like Buffy. But this was the big one in young adulthood. And it rocked so much. And then it fell so far.
And I would still rewatch it. I think I would just watch the first 6 seasons and stop, which is what I think I've done.
Yep, very, very much. And that is the end of the Game of Thrones.
You've been listening to the Fangirl Diaries. Follow us on Instagram at Fangirl Diaries Pod. And do share us with any of your friends that you think might enjoy the podcast, and rate or review us on Spotify or Apple Music.